is, will there be a third COVID wave? And if there is one, can the economy actually afford it?
Yeah. If these questions you're asking as if we can sort of economists can control the third wave. We would have loved to do that if that were the case.
I know you can't control the third wave. I'm asking if you can control the economy if there is a third wave. Let's face it, it is a possibility, and let's pray that that's not the case.
As I was mentioning, not only in India but across the world, the economic fortunes have been quite linked with the pandemic itself. One redeeming feature that has been observed across countries is that the impact of the second wave has not been felt as much as the first wave, because countries have learned to work with the pandemic itself. And the second thing that is quite becoming quite important is vaccination itself, the pace of vaccination. And here, the evidence seems to suggest that even the first dose itself seems to matter a lot in providing protection on average. Of course, there are cases of people, we all know of individuals, some individuals who have gotten the virus despite getting the first dose or maybe even sometimes the second dose. But when you look in aggregate, what is very clear, US, UK, Israel, other countries as well, these are three countries which are quite vaccinated a large proportion. The vaccination is indeed providing protection.
Sure.
So that's the second thing that has to be really emphasized upon. The pace of vaccination has to be accelerated, because as we are mentioning, the fear of the pandemic declining is quite critical for the uncertainty.
And you've hit the nail on the head. We keep saying this on a daily basis: vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. At this juncture, we don't have the vaccines. The government has said that the vaccines, there's going to be an uptick in vaccine procurement, 2 billion doses by the end of December. And as all of these doses progressively start coming in, we can vaccinate up to 1 crore, a day. And that's a huge number. But in order for that to for us to be actually able to physically vaccinate at 1 crore a day, requires an uptick, which is at least 4 to 5 times what we are seeing now. So quite apart from the physical acquisition of vaccines, isn't the actual process of vaccination something we haven't talked about enough? Isn't that going to be the biggest challenge? In villages, people are scared, getting vaccines out there, going. So tell us your thoughts on the physical administration of the vaccine.
So that's a good point, Vishnu. I would like to point out that if you looked at the peak vaccination rate that we have achieved, that was in excess of 40 lakhs a day, about 42 lakhs. And this is with just us doing one shift of about 8 to 9 hours of vaccination. Now, 1 crore is essentially about 2.5 times that the 42 lakhs. If we are able to do it in 2 shifts and maybe even possibly 24/7, then it is certainly possible to be able to vaccinate at 1 crore a day. And I think that should be a target that we should be aiming for, because the sooner we vaccinate greater proportion of the population, the better it is. One other aspect that I must mention is also the seroprevalence. If you recall, the ICMR survey in December had shown that about 21% of the population had antibodies because of the infection that they had gotten. And now with the second wave, the estimates and a lot of people have actually discussed this with a lot of researchers as well. The estimates would be that close to maybe 40% of the population may have the antibodies. So if you're able to, keep in mind that there may be some duplication. In other words, people who have the antibodies may be getting the vaccination as well. But to the extent that, let's say, the rural areas, if you are able to vaccinate more, because that will really sort of reduce some of the double counting, that can enable in us getting closer to the herd immunity. One key point I want to mention: we've been looking at some evidence for the United States, for instance. States, across the United States, controlling for a bunch of other factors. What we see is that about 25% or so seems to be a threshold where, after which the death rates really does decline. Now this is for one country, of course, but I think that evidence is also something that is quite pertinent for us to keep in mind.
Sure.
And especially the first dose itself seems to have an impact. Second dose adds some impact, but the first dose itself is also quite important.
And you know what
so I
will
think
be,
it is possible to do
sure,
one more day.